This is Shirley Collier interviewing for Living Legends. This is April the 3rd, 1980, and we're interviewing Stacy Pahdapony at Lawton, Oklahoma, at Fort Sill.
My name is Stacy Pahdapony. I'm a member of the Comanche tribe. I have served my country in the armed forces during World War II. I was born approximately 2 miles south of Comanche, Oklahoma, in a tent. As of this day, there is no birthday record or any birthday reported on me when I was born. They have used my discharge papers as an official document for my age, as well as other parts where they are referred to as a birth certificate. I was raised by my grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Pahdapony. I was taken when I was approximately 5 years old from my parents and was raised by my grandparents. And I was taught all of my Indian tradition, customs, culture, and I can speak Comanche very fluently. At the time that I went to school, they said that I was 7 years old, but they had to take their word for it. When my grandfather took me to a day school by our farm, the only 2 words I could speak of English was yes and no. I was taught by a school teacher named Mrs. Lily Craig. I want to say that I want to thank this lady for having taught everything that I know up to the time that I left the elementary school to go into high school. This lady was very patient with me. She taught me just about everything I knew as far as I could speak English when I left there. I have been around Fort Sill, Oklahoma, from the time that I was a little boy. My grandmother and I used to go through Fort Sill on a white hack going to her farm by Lake Watonka. We went by the 4 Mile Crossing many times, and I have seen quite a bit of this area up to the time that what it is now as one of the outstanding artillery center. I can recall when at the commissary we used to stop and buy meat and bread there. That was years ago. And I can recall a lot of the buildings now that's been changed in this area. And I have been with my grandmother until up to the time that she passed away. And then from then on, I have went with my mother and my father then, and I stayed with them until the time that I was ready to go into high school. When I went to high school, and from high school, I went to the service.
Could you tell us what year you were born?
1920, June the 9th, 1923. That is what they said, but there's no birth certificate or nothing to back it up.
They knew what.
But like I said, they've been using my discharge papers as my official documents. So really, there's no record of me in any place. They just said that was the date, and that was it. But I can recall a lot of incidents here in Lawton when it was first forming to be a metropolis city. I have seen areas in Lawton where it was just vacant lots with grass and a lot of other kind of weeds growing in different lots on the main street of Lawton. And I can recall a lot of my old people that used to come there. Of course, they're all gone now. But there was a place where the biggest majority of my Comanche tribe used to gather on Saturdays. That's no more. I have seen different traditional dances, and I've seen some of our historical sites, buildings here in Fort Sill Indian School, and as well as here on the post. A lot of them is gone now, and some is still there.
You said here you remember when you first lived in a wooden house. Do you know how
Yes.
old you were? You remember how
I was
you were
about
that?
5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, when most of my people lived in tents and some teepees, but the fortunate ones, I guess, I would say, is the ones that they had the wooden homes built for them. And I seen them, a lot of my people living in those, moving out of tents and living in the wooden houses. But they would most of them would only just be in there and eat in there, but if they're going to sleep, well, they go back out into their tent or teepee.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, they didn't trust sleeping inside the wooden houses. I don't know why, but they always wanted to
That
go.
just wasn't their custom, I
That's
guess,
right.
and they weren't used to it.
But they always want to go outside. And I've seen where my people used to travel a lot on wagons and horses, and I've ridden in many of them, and I've rode horseback when I was a child, because that was one of the traditions, I guess. Or if you see some young kid on a horse, well, you would consider him, well, he comes from must be a pretty well-to-do family, because he has his own horse, he has his own saddle and bridle, but I never thought of it that way, because of course, we had a lot of horses, and I wasn't in need of a horse because I had plenty, and my parents had plenty of horses, and they had wagon, and when we traveled, well, we would go in wagon even I can recall us going up to Anadarko, Oklahoma, to see our agency up there. That was where the Anadarko agency was the tribal office for all the Indians in this area. And I can recall us going up there on wagons, and we had spent all night someplace just right on this side of Anadarko, and then next morning we would be there early in the morning and conduct our business, and we'd come back home.
Take all day to come
Yes,
back.
on a team of horses. Then I can recall that when I was a youngster coming to Lawton, we used to come the same way, but my grandmother had a little two-room house here at the church here, which was the Dutch Reformed Church now, but at that time they called it Yellow Mission. I don't know why. Maybe it's because the building was yellow, painted yellow. But we used to come down there and spend the night and maybe the weekend and go back home. But my grandfather was appointed by, at the time that he was going to pass away, which was our tribal chief, Quanah Parker. He looked around and was looking for a successor. And none of his children, he said, was ready to replace him.
How many children did he have?
Quanah Parker?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as far as I can recall, he had about, I believe it was three children. I mean, men,
Mm-hmm.
but he had women too. But he didn't think that none of them could serve in his position when he passed away, so he appointed my grandfather.
How old was he when he passed away? About.
I don't know really, but when when he passed away, he appointed my grandfather to be his successor. His name was Old Eagle. But at the time that when he passed away and they were going to replace him with my grandfather, the Washington office said that we wouldn't have no more chiefs anymore. Our chieftainship would end there. We would form our own tribal government. So that's when our tribal government was formed, was after Quanah Parker passed away.
You remember about what year that was?
No, I don't. I really don't know, because that was before my time. This is my father and my uncle told me this.
Mm-hmm.
And of course my father and uncle is still living. My uncle is 85 and my dad's 80. And they know Quanah Parker real well. In fact, they stayed with him many times over there at his home at Star House at Cache, Oklahoma. And they knew his customs and his ways, because they lived with him there a while. They'd go back home and come back, and they knew him real well. And I have seen where when the area around Fort Sill and Lawton, where they still had streetcars going from Fort Sill to Lawton back and forth. I have ridden in many of them from Fort Sill to Lawton. And we have places where you could turn around, you might say, here at Fort Sill on the streetcar. We would catch it here at Fort Sill. We would come in from the country and catch it here sometimes and ride in on it into Lawton.
How far is Lawton from Fort Sill?
Oh, I guess it's about a couple of miles, but I have seen that taking place, and I have been around a lot of my elder people that's no more here that were our tribal leaders. I've observed and watched a lot of their gatherings and a lot of their meetings with different officials from Washington, D.C., and I heard a lot of my people get up and talk in pretty foreign tribes, and I have learned to think that my people comes first besides me, because I think that right to this day, a lot of my people are not, they're just not able to take care of themselves like they should. But I'm very fortunate. I've been able to retire from Fort Sill with approximately 32 years of service, and I think that what little knowledge that I've gained through going to school and here, well, I was trying to help my people.
Yes.
And I formed our first Comanche housing authority here for my people. I formed it, and I was the chairman of it for approximately 10 years. And when I retired, then I just got out. But I have always tried to promote my people in whatever way I could. And I think that maybe some of my people like me, or people my age, don't look at things like that, but I do. And I have tried to carry on to the best of my ability and my knowledge as to whatever that someone asks of me, and I feel grateful for Fort Sill for giving me the opportunity to work here and to retire here.
You were how old when you enlisted in the Army?
I was 18. I just finished high school. When I finished high school, approximately about 2 or 3 weeks, I was given my notice to report to the induction center at Lawton. And then from Lawton, I went on to Oklahoma City and then from Oklahoma City I went on to the West Coast. But I haven't had too much freedom to speak of like some of those kids who after finished high school. As soon as I was out of high school, I went on to the service, and I put 3.5 years in the service. And then after the war, I came back. And after I came back, I went on to college. I went to Cameron Junior College. And then from then on, after I finished there, I went on to one-year business college, Dalton's Business College in Lawton. And then from then, I applied for a job here, and then
You worked here as a civilian then?
Yes, and I've been here ever since until June of last year, which was 79. I retired for 32 years.
Tell us something about your work here.
I held several jobs when I first came to Fort Sill. I came here. I worked in the postal department here for a while, and then I went to the maintenance, aviation maintenance. From there, I was with the aviation maintenance for several years until they contracted it all out, and then from then on, I went on to the procurement section. In the procurement section, I held several positions, and when I was in the procurement section, I was the assistant procurement officer and also the contract assistant, the labor compliance officer, as well as the EEO counselor for the post, for our section here in the post. And I have dealt with a lot of problems in racial matter, and I have seen problems where we went to school on racial problems that it got pretty hostile, and but nevertheless I was able to. I'm glad that I was able to help what little I can towards resolving differences between management and labor. And I have seen where management at one time, you could not speak to management, but later on management has got to the point where they would listen to labor, and you could discuss your differences over the table rather than trying to settle it elsewhere. But during the time that I served 32 years in a post, I've seen and I've been in positions where management looked down on labor very hard, and I think now that has all changed the time that I was leaving, and I think now that it's got to the point where, like I said before, that management and labor now can discuss their differences over a table rather than their differences in some other way.
Mr. Pahdapony, would you explain to us the difference between a tent and a teepee?
Yes, the teepee, as you see them erected throughout various places, the teepee is set up or comprised with approximately 18 to 20 poles that is tied at the top with the base extended out in a circular in different dimensions. As you can see, that there are large difference between the ordinary tent and the teepee. The tent is not erected like the teepee. The tent is consists of very few a ridge pole and two uprights, and stop down with approximately about 10 poles and stobs. But the teepee is not. The teepee also, in erecting a teepee, you have to know how to put the cover on the teepee over the poles, and you also have to know how to stob it down. It's a lot difficult than an ordinary tent. I have lived inside teepees, and I've lived inside tents, and I know how much of a job it is to erect a teepee. I have been shown by my grandparents, because I was raised by my elders, my grandparents, on how to erect one of these teepee tents or teepees.
Does it take quite a lot of practice to learn how to put one of those up?
Yes, it does, because right to this day, my father has his own, and we were instructed at the time that we first were taught how to put the teepees up. We were shown just one time, and my father says that if you don't learn it the first time, then there's no sense of you trying to erect another one. So my father's pretty strict in his teachings, and whatever he shows us, we should be able to do it the next time. So, based on what my father has shown us, well, and my grandparents, well, I can just about erect one of those blindfolded, as well as the teaching of my grandparents as to our ways and customs and traditions. I was brought up on all that.
About how long does it take to erect one?
If you don't have real hard wind or any other inclement weather, it should take about an hour to correctly erect a teepee. But if you got a hard wind and all that, you're going to have quite a bit of problem erecting one. So I've seen people try to put one up when the wind was blowing about 20 to 30 miles an hour, and it took about 3 hours to put one up, because you're not going to, after you erect it up and see that some part of it's not right, you have to take it back down and set it up the right way. But if you didn't have no wind or nothing like that, you just set it right on up, and in about an hour's time you got it all complete.
Could you tell us a little bit about the cultures that you learned, of the Indian cultures that you learned when you were a boy?
Yes, I was taught by my parents, my grandparents, on different types of dances and different types of songs that our people used in different ceremonies and different celebrations. We were told that you only use or sing certain type of songs for certain type of dances, and then as well as in different ceremonies.
Did the Indians celebrate their birthdays like the people do today?
No, they didn't. And I believe that at the time that when we become a statehood here in the state of Oklahoma, that's about the time that people were beginning to notice birthdays, because to the Indians that was just another day. I mean, they didn't observe it no way other. But now, since we got civilized, I'd say, well, and we went to schools and learned different holidays, well, we do now beginning to observe birthdays.
What were the occasions that you celebrated?
One of the biggest was 4th of July, because my Indian people are staunch supporters for celebration and commemorating their country's either freedom or something that involves their country. as you know, 4th of July was Independence Day. Well, they really take that in great stride, you might say, because they are people that's more or less thinks more and about their country. I believe they really do take that first because.
Well, that has a great meaning for them.
Yes,
doesn't
it does. And but the other celebrations, which comes such as the
So there's a peyote ceremony that Quanah Parker introduced?
that's different. The celebration besides 4th of July is generally maybe a big celebration, the birthday of some city, like Lawton used to have a celebration on their birthday, and a lot of the Indians used to come down and take part in it.
Well, did your people celebrate certain occasions before you had the things that we celebrate now as today? Did you have certain things that you celebrated when you were growing up as with your Indian tribe?
No, occasionally they would have what they call a powwow, you might say. Some family or some man would put on a powwow for the area or the tribe at their home or at some location, and a lot of the people went and camped and took part in the dancing.
What is the purpose of a powwow? What is the...
Well, back there was a lot different from what it is now.
Yeah, really.
Back there is when someone put on a powwow, everybody came and camped, and he had it for about 3-4 days, and he would feed everybody. He would go out and butcher and then bring the meat and divide it or give it to all the campers, and that was just about it. Was just the meat. They didn't have no other such as bread and flour and all that to go with. All it was just meat, and they were just thankful for that. And they would have these celebrations for about 3-4 days at a certain place. And another reason was maybe John Doe was going to run for congressman or something for that area, and he happened to know this, and then he wants to get all the Indian votes in that area, so he sometimes put on one of these gatherings so you get all the Indians down there, and then he'll give about a 20-minute speech or a 30-minute speech there telling them who he was and what he's doing, and he would ask for their votes.
So really a powwow is like a gathering.
That's just about it, yeah.
Reasons,
Yeah.
maybe.
When they were married in your tribe, when you were growing up, were they did they make very much of a celebration of a marriage, or
No,
was
because
this done by the chief? How was that?
well, really, at the time before we become civilized and start knowing what marriage license was, there was nothing to it. If you decide that you want some girl or some lady, well, you would go and ask her parents.
It was just agreement, more or less,
That's
between
all.
the two.
And then if you say yeah, then she would leave with him then, and that was it. That was his wife then.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is there an exchange, like in the early days they used to have a forced exchange, but later on, how did
Well,
it develop? How did it change?
really, that was quite so like that. That's been blown out by these fiction writers and
Yes,
all.
I bet it has,
It's
too.
blown out of proportion. I'm going to bring so many horses or something. They didn't quite do that them days. Only time that was done is where the boy, or the man, was from a real wealthy family. He would bring him as a present. That's all. But it wasn't required.
It wasn't a custom, really.
No, it wasn't, because I know a lot of times where I seen when I was a child where some person come and asked to take this girl to be his bride, and then they said, yeah, go ahead. So that was it. I mean, he didn't bring no
So
wagons.
did the
and
girl
horses.
have some say-so about it? Was
Not
it
too
a...
much, because at that time they looked up to their parents. I mean,
The
their-
parents made the decision, more or less?
Yes, and the mother and father had the final say-so on everything, and that's how come you see a lot
Did
of
they live in a group then,
Yes,
the
and
young
then,
people, and they helped them?
all the kids, all the children used to live with the parents, regardless of how big they got. That was that family, and that's how come you see right to this time a lot of the younger generation still lives with their parents. See, even though they got children, that's kind of a hang-on, a tradition from way back there. And a lot of people say, well, what are you doing here? You should be out away from your mother and your dad. Well, that's something hard to explain, because that's been handed down from the beginning of time that the Indians lived up to what we are now. Of course, some leave as soon as they get married, and they made a home someplace. But a lot of them still hangs close to their parents.
Can you tell us about how many tribes live in the Lawton area?
Well, around the Lawton area now, you have a lot of different tribes living in this area, but before the but before, the Lawton area was all Comanche area. This was all Comanche land. And
Oh, I see. This has happened then just in the later years
Yes,
that the others
Well,
have...
the intertribal agency here claims there's over 800 tribes. Do they mean tribes, or is it families? I'm
No,
not quite sure what they
I'll tell
mean
you,
about
let me-
800 tribes.
there's, you take my tribe only, Comanches. There's approximately between about pretty close to 8,000 of us Comanches, and we're not living in this area. We're scattered all over the.
This has been an interview with Stacy Pahdapony. Pahdapony. Will you spell it for us,
I'll
please?
spell it with time. It's a sharp Pahdapony.
D-O.
D-O, I think.